People, when you step out and you start your own business, one of the biggest failures that people make is they don't check themselves against anyone. They all of a sudden take off and they start the business and they say, great, I've started the business, I'm ready to go. And you know who your biggest fans are? They're your family, right? You go home to your spouse, or you go home to your parents, or you go home to your friends, and you say, check this out, I've got this really cool idea. And what do they say? Hey man, that's really cool, I really like that idea. You're great, you're so smart, you're such a good entrepreneur. And what happens? You start building yourself up more and more and more, but you're not checking yourself against anything. I'm the guy that comes along and says like, wait a minute, as an entrepreneur, if you're really that good, where's your data? Where are your numbers? Where's your revenue? How come you're not making money? Where's your product? So most people don't like talking to me because they call me the dream crusher, because I sit down with them and I say, hey, that's great that for the last 5 years you've had this business idea, but I'm going to ask you some really hard questions. In 2012, 1,500 startups were funded by VCs, meaning that the VCs just took a startup from scratch. 50,000 of them were funded by angel investors. VCs fund about 1 in 400. Angels fund 1 in 40. These are round numbers for this class. Millions of great ideas are out there. 514,000 startups per month on average last year. So 6 million businesses went into startup mode last year. Right? So what happens? Only 8% of them were funded. Of those that were funded, still half of them failed. But what does that mean? That means that 4% of the ideas were actually really good ideas. The rest of the people that did the startup based on a friend said something, or hey, you really ought to do this. And we hear that quite often. Think about your dinner table conversations. Everyone you know has a great idea. You're sitting there around the dinner table, you're talking about it, and mom, dad, aunt, uncle, somebody says something like, oh, I think that would be a really cool idea. You know, if I could make this, then I would do this and this and this. Everybody has an idea. But getting into business is 99% perspiration, and it's really only 1% inspiration, because everybody's got the idea, but only a very few of us have the perspiration or the work to actually, the work ethic to put it into to make it great, to put it into practice. So what do? You check yourself a little bit. You ask professionals. You check yourselves against them. You'll know when the right time is to jump ship. And when I say jump ship, if you want to see it like that, and most people do, I look at it like you're going to pause your current pathway and you're going to deviate a little bit and see if you start a new pathway. I don't see it as the end of the world. My parents did at the time. They saw it as like, this is the end of the world. He's going to be a failure. Like, how do we disown our son but still love him? Because, you know, whatever. Anyway, but what happens is you are the ones that keep yourselves from succeeding. And that's what I had to admit. I had to admit that it was my own fear. It wasn't money. It wasn't the fact that I had pressures everywhere else. It was my own fear at the end. So you are the answer and you are the solution. So you got to be careful when you jump into business. You have to know if you have a false sense of confidence or a true sense of confidence. And that's what I love about the Entrepreneurship Center here on campus, because you can go in and you can check yourself with mentors. And people that don't, you know, you'll get 1 in 1,000 that succeed. And they have a really great idea, and the idea kind of sells itself. But a lot of people out there aren't checking themselves, so they go and spend a lot of time, they spend a lot of somebody else's money, they fail, and then you hear why 95% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. But you've got to have measurable results when you check yourself. You must know when and what to check yourself against. Sometimes you have a government restriction, sometimes banks, they help check you and put things in place. But I tell people, stop going to friends, because they're your friends for a reason, right? They're going to tell you some of the things that you want to hear. When we succeed, it's only because we ask ourselves the tough questions, which is, how do I make it to get this point? How do I do this? Not what are all the excuses why, but start asking yourself some of the hard questions.